Today we're going to talk to attorneys and real estate sellers in California and real estate agents. We're going to talk to you about why it's so important to start every transaction with a documented zero buyer agent commission. And it is important for sellers, but it's probably even more important for every realtor, every brokerage, every franchise to document this. And I know and I've said before in the videos, everyone who sold a house in California is like, but John, we cannot put buyer agent compensation up on the MLS anymore. So it's effectively zero. It is zero with respect to the MLS. But the question is, did you as a realtor, and I'm going to speak to attorneys and sellers, but the realtors are included. Did the realtor, the listing realtor who was out at your house or who you listed with, did they discuss buyer agent compensation? As a seller, did you ask the realtor, hey, so it's going to be 2.5 or 3% that I'm paying you. What will I have to pay buyer's agents? And did that conversation come up at all? And I can tell you, in my experience as a broker and attorney in California, and talking to realtors who've sold homes, it comes up every time. I mean, especially sellers that are sensitive about the price of their home in the slower markets. I mean, they want to know what their net's going to be sometimes to see if they can move on with their lives. But I can't imagine anybody with any experience at all when selling their home isn't going to ask about commissions. I mean, it's just, it was probably what, 100, 1 in 1,000 wouldn't ask. So now the realtor is, who knows what their rap is. They probably some are better at it than others. But in the end, they're going to say something like, well, we're going to let the offers come in and then you can negotiate buyer agent commission. Or they might even tell you that the buyer and the buyer's agent have agreed to an amount of buyer agent compensation and they're going to request it on this form. This would be a purchase contract. Oh, I don't have the forms up. Let me bring over the monitor. And I got to put that back. Sorry, I'm glad I caught myself here. So let's switch to like maybe a picture-in-picture. Well, first I got to bring up. I don't even know how to switch the monitors. Okay, we got that. Now let me see if I can bring myself up in the corner. Yeah, okay, that kind of works for now. So on this is the California Purchase Agreement. And now I got to look over there to spin through it. And this box is where the buyer and the buyer's agent will be asking the seller to pay them 2.5 or 3%. And I want everyone to be clear that this is now a third-party beneficiary clause. It is hopefully, but not necessarily, this is the amount of money that the buyer has agreed to pay the buyer agent if that agent helps them buy your home. And the seller should know, anytime you let an agent show your property in California and probably everywhere in the country, that agent already, because of MLS rules, not our California state law. State law does not say they have to figure out a number yet that they're going to get paid. But the Realtor Association and the Realtor rules demand that the buyer agent agrees in writing. Well, let me make that clear too. I've got one over here. So every buyer's agent, before they show your property, is going to have their buyer. Oh no, that's the BRBC. I got it over here. Why did I even cover it up? You probably can't even see it anyway, right? It's not that one. It is. This should be it right here. Where's the little boxes in the beginning? Oh, there it is. Sorry. And they're going to write in 2.5 or 3%. That's what they're doing now. They've been told that they have little sales scripts, and they've been told to tell their buyers, yeah, 2.5 or 3% is a lot of money, but don't worry, we'll get the seller to pay for it. And because they have a form where they can check a box, it seems unfair to sellers that realtors have a form where they can check a box, but they do. And now the buyer is agreeing to pay the buyer's agent before they even see your property, right? That's the background. These are the things you have to know. Now, we're going to talk to why it's so important. Let me go back to that form. Why it's so important. Let's see if I put that there. Do we see it? No, we don't see my form. That's not good news. I'm going to have to add a scene here, I believe, media. And now I'm going to screen. But I need to change the screen. I'm sorry. This has made it difficult. But I'm not going to give up on this yet. We got to get this done. So let me delete that. Well, let me go back. We'll go back to the. Wow, why can't I get this to show up when I move it over? I'm not sure why it's not showing up. Add scene, and add media, screen. Delete. Wow. One more try. I gotta add a scene. We're gonna add a camera, maybe? No. Well, I'm back. Okay, so at least you can see me while I'm working on this. We're gonna add a scene. Media. I'm gonna add over here. Screen share, I guess, is what it's gonna want me to do. And now I got it. Oh wow, I'm sorry. Seller instructions. So there we go. Wow. Okay, so now I'm sorry about that, but here is what I've created to help attorneys and sellers protect themselves from the risks that are being created by real estate agents. Now, let me expand this. I want to make it bigger. No, that didn't help. Okay, so as we go through my form here, we will see that we have the seller acknowledges that they are under no legal obligation to offer buyer agent compensation as part of the sale of their home. Now, this is what I created for my office for my seller. So I want the sellers to know they can always offer zero buyer agent compensation, and that agreeing to compensate a buyer's agent may entail the following risks, and they're included but not limited to are the perceptions of steering or conflicts of interest with the buyer's agent and their client. By getting involved in paying the buyer agent compensation, you are creating potential conflicts between the buyer and the buyer agent, even if they've asked for it. I mean, like the lawsuits are pretty obvious, but nevertheless they won. I mean, buyers in some of those lawsuits are acting like, I didn't know the money was coming from my own pockets to pay my buyer agent. I was told it was free. I mean, yeah, well, I'm not. I don't need to put those people down. I'm just saying, I mean, how many people really didn't know? Now, potential legal actions from buyers or other parties. That's what the risk is. The listing agent is not licensed to advise the seller on legal or financial risks associated with compensating buyer's agents. The seller may visit, I haven't put up that website. This is just a website that you could put in Certified Seller Advocate to learn more. Seller acknowledges agreement is separate from the purchase contract and serves to document the seller's instruction regarding buyer agent compensation. Okay, so now, these are the scenarios that I think all sellers should be aware of when beginning their listing. And this would be scenario one. I'm trying to pull it over here so I can see it better. Look, can I still? Yeah, okay, it's still there. Good. Scenario one, no buyer compensation offered for now. And this for some sellers, this is the scenario they're going to want to stay with for really the entire time. I mean, if you're selling a home in a strong market and offers are coming in that you haven't had to offer buyer agent compensation and you already have multiple offers on the table, you might just stay with zero buyer agent compensation. There may be times, if you're very risk averse, you don't need to sell this property now. Why take on the risks of steering, compromising the fiduciary duty of the buyer's agent? Why take on the risks of being involved with realtors and price fixing? Why take on the risk that of inconsistent offers of buyer agent compensations where protected classes might sue you for discrimination. I mean, why get involved in that? That's all things that are going to be visited upon you when you wind up paying a buyer's agent. If you stick with zero, you don't have to worry about any of those things. And there are still ways to sell your home without paying buyer agent commission. I mean, that's why you're hiring a listing agent. You should talk to a listing agent about how they would help you sell a home without having to pay buyer agent compensation. There are ways to do it. I'm not saying they'll work every time and in every market, but it's something every seller should be considering. Secondly, buyer agent compensation contemplated with written offer. Now, this is pretty much where most realtors are now, right? They're saying buyer agent compensation contemplated with written offer. This is another way of saying seller is amenable to buyer's agent compensation. Submit the offer and we can start negotiating. It is seen by realtors as being less risky than advertising buyer agent compensation or broadcasting it or marketing it. I don't agree with that distinction. I don't even know where they're getting it from, because the issue is that I actually don't understand the logic. Because if they're allowing their seller to pay buyer agent compensation, they're still exposing their sellers to risks of compromising the fiduciary duty of the buyer's agent. And those risks should be mitigated, and they can be mitigated substantially. They're still exposing their sellers to risks of steering. I mean, that's built into this process. If the offer comes in and the buyer's agent is asking for 3%, the buyer's asking to pay their agent 3%. If a seller says no, what is a listing agent going to counsel their seller? They're going to say, well, there's a chance the buyer will have to walk because the buyer might not have the cash to pay their agent. They need to buy the home and have their agent paid because they're borrowing the money. They don't have the extra money beyond their deposit. So by having the buyer agree to the buyer agent commission ahead of time in writing and then checking the box on G3, steering is built into that process. If you read the Department of Justice, the second memo in the NOSLIC DOJ case, they alluded to these problems in their second statement. So the first statement brought up compromising the fiduciary duty of the buyer's agents very clearly and the other risks. The second one said the way they're planning to fix this isn't changing the problem, and I don't think it has. They're still steering. It's actually institutionalized by these forms in the process. Can it be mitigated against? Yes. Should it be mitigated 100%? Can a realtor do it? No, not unless they're an attorney. So I don't see the advantage of being passive about this. Our realtors are losing out on all the benefits of offering, or many of the benefits of offering buyer agent compensation, and yet they're still saddling their seller with the risks of doing it now. I realize that's the way 95 to 90% of these home sales are going, but it's the least optimal way for the seller. And realtors, you really should be telling your seller that there's a better way to do this, or there can be, that we can mitigate the risk. We can leverage buyer agent compensation to get more showings and more offers and sell for more. We're just not able to do it without a lawyer. I mean, if you were a good realtor, you'd be explaining that to your seller. If you cared about your fiduciary duty and didn't want to breach it on every transaction, you'd be saying there are ways that might be superior to what we're doing, but I can't do them without an attorney. I mean, it's just like if your seller's going to pay 2.5 or 3% on an ad hoc basis as they're coming in, if you're going to encourage them to do that, if it's your language, or you're going to say, well, the market's difficult. If there's a possibility, you'll tell them to take that. Why are you not broadcasting it? Why are you not going on social media and saying, we're having an open house this weekend. We are offering 3% buyer agent commission, or up to 3%, or we're amenable, because multiple things are going to happen. Smart, crafty buyers are going to say, that gives me an opportunity to buy this house, which is listed on the MLS for this price, with a 3% discount because I'll represent myself, or I'll go through the listing agent. Maybe that's what they're thinking. But they certainly say, because I can do it myself. And they're like, so I can go in and use that to my benefit. That alone is a cool marketing strategy. And many buyers are that savvy. Now, secondly, it is an advantage If you're going to the caravans and you're telling your realtor to market to buyer's agents, they're going to the caravan saying, we've got 3% if you get us this offer in the next 30 days. And they talk about the home. They're going to wake up the people in the meeting. First of all, they're going to be like, I can't even know he or she can do that. That's amazing. Secondly, they're going to be able to put it on yard signs, social media, their own website. I realize a lot of brokerages are not allowing their realtors to do it, but it's a major. They're just wrong. I mean, you could talk to the National Association of Realtors attorney. The problem is that realtors can't mitigate the risks. You can do it if you explain the risk to your client and you can help them mitigate the risks. You can do it if there's an attorney on your team. To not do it is a mistake. To not do it to try to create multiple offers is, I think, a breach of fiduciary duty. If your client is open to doing it, if they're open to selling, what's the risk? If you do it properly, as we'll discuss I have a whole bunch of modules. I don't want to click around again, but if you look at my module, I think it's 7 or 8, I talk about the best way. We did it. It creates multiple offers. So it's a mistake not to do it. Now, you can also handle this scenario is not just waiting for the offer to come in. Another way to do it would be to it's offered upon request, right? I think that a percentage of realtors are stating it that way. So the seller's offer open to compensation, or the buyer agent is open to 3% or 2.5%, or the seller's offering 2.5% or 3% buyer agent compensation. Again, there are reasons when people call on the phone, you're saying, yeah, we're paying buyer agent compensation. You'll probably get more showings out of that rather than saying, wait and see. You're going to say, yeah, we're going to do it. We're offering 3%. My client is open to 3%. My client is paying 3%. So that would be this third box. Again, if you're doing that, you have to mitigate the risk, in my opinion, as an attorney. If you are doing it the right way to bring in more showings and bring in more offers, your seller has to be advised of the risks, and you have to be able to mitigate them. And then the fourth way, and this is the way I would advise. When I talk to sellers, many of them already know they're going to have to pay buyer agent compensation. They just get past experience. They know they have to pay buyer agent compensation, or they know in the past it worked. They used to get multiple showings and multiple offers because they were doing it. They don't necessarily realize that the system's changed dramatically, and that therefore the way realtors, like being passive and just waiting the offers come in. I mean, why not? I mean, there are times you could say, no, we're going to offer you $5,000, not $35,000, not $40,000, not $50,000, $5,000. And there are times that might work. I mean, if a seller is not desperate to sell right now, why would you pay 3% buyer agent commission on a $2 million home if you've already got an offer you can accept in your hands, or after a round or two, the number that's in front of the seller's good in terms of it would hit their net, but when they look at 3%, another $50,000 to the buyer's agent, they're like, oh no, we're still $50,000 short, or we're $40,000 short. Why not say, well, if they're $40,000 short, why not say we're going to take your commissions and knock them down to $10,000? Why wouldn't sellers do that? Well, they are afraid, those agents, that there's steering involved and the buyers will walk. So, I mean, if you're not willing to negotiate buyer agent compensation down drastically, you're in a process of steering. You 100% know you need a lawyer to explain that to your sellers. As more and more attorneys find out and they understand through the lens that buyer agent compensation is no longer the listing agents to share, it's a separate third-party commission, there will be lawsuits, in my prediction. I'm an attorney and a broker in California. I don't know how listing agents have allowed, let's say, approximately 200,000 times in 2025. It's December 2025 right now. 85 to 95% of the sales involve buyer agent commission going to a third party. How many of those listing agents who aren't attorneys had their sellers mitigate the risks? when it could have been substantial mitigation done with forms and a little bit of intro training on the forms. I mean, there's better ways to do it, but how many sellers did that? Have any of those buyers waived their risks to sue the seller for compromising the fiduciary duty of their buyer's agent, for steering, or for keeping the price of the home high so they could pay their buyer's agent, sort of commission fixing and high pricing? Has any seller asked the buyer to say, acknowledge that the source of the funds to pay their buyer agent was out of their own pocket, out of their own money, out of their own proceeds? Because that's what some of those class action suits were about. It's pretty obvious when I explain it. Have the seller acknowledge that you're paying their buyer agent as a convenience to them, and that they need to acknowledge that the money being paid to the buyer's agent is coming from the proceeds that the buyer's bringing to the table, whether from their loans or from their own cash. If you're paying the buyer agent their full commission, what is the chance that would blow up a deal? Asking the seller to acknowledge that. So, it's crazy. So now, buyer agent compensation pre-authorized for broadcast. Now, as I said before, if you're going to pay it, why not leverage it and get more showings and have it set up so maybe your realtor can't do it. So you find someone you can, and you do it. You do the marketing for 4 or 5 days, and then maybe for the weekend you then sign the listing agreement with the realtor. So you've already done the broadcasting, the advertising, and now you're going to reap the rewards if there are any. I mean, it's possible in your market there won't be a lot of showings that weekend, and you're like, well, rather than try again next week, let's just go ahead and be passive and do it the normal realtor way. I mean, there's no harm in broadcasting, because you don't have to pay it. Just because you're offering it doesn't mean it has to be paid. It's still negotiated. It's not even like a menu item where if they order it, the price is determined. I mean, it's in California, the rule is just because you're saying you're offering it doesn't mean you have to pay it. So in the end, if you don't get offers, if you made something very specific, you should talk to a lawyer about it. But if you're saying we're amenable, we'll pay buyer agent compensation, it would be tricky if you said, if we get an offer above our ask price in the next 2 weeks, we will pay 3% buyer agent compensation. That might be such a strong offer that you might have trouble going against that one. But normally the offer of compensation has been seen in the past as as contingent upon other terms being acceptable. But if you made the terms obvious, the other terms obvious, then maybe it's no longer a contingent offer. Now, why would you do this? Well, if you do it right, if you broadcast it right and you set it up as sort of an open house weekend with a non-binding auction, you take in a few offers, and there are ways to produce multiple offers, and you set up that weekend right. Even 10, 12, whatever it was, 15 years ago, even in the short sale markets, most of the time houses in San Diego could get multiple offers, or they did. I think it's fair to say over a period of a few days, you would have seen multiple offers at all except for the bottom of the markets. Looking back, since maybe it was like 2008, right before they gave a little bit of tax break to new buyers, which sort of revved up the market, there was a period of time where maybe in San Diego, you didn't have a chance for multiple offers. You could always price yourself so high you wouldn't get offers, but a property priced well and competitively frequently got multiple offers, even in the short sale market. So, if you're doing this right, if you're advertising right, if you're marketing right, you have a chance to have a multiple offer weekend. And at that point in time, if you can get the buyers to compete against each other, you'll see the price of the home come up, and you'll see the buyer agent commission. Once they start getting to around what the right price of the home is, and everyone knows where that is, you will not on every house, but usually, then you'll start seeing buyer agent commission naturally go away. So maybe not fully, but to a substantial degree. So if you're going to pay buyer agent compensation, you really should be working with an agent that can help you with scenario 4. Now, this was for me, right? Because I'm an attorney. I don't see how a non-attorney realtor can even get on the phone and discuss buyer agent compensation with okay, so remember, it's clause G3. Do I even want to try to pull that back up? I don't. But G3 in the purchase contract, that's a third-party beneficiary clause. There's a third-party contract between the buyer and the buyer's agent for amount of money. Countering that, and okay, so initially it comes over and it's part of the contract. So if your agent calls up and starts negotiating that, I mean, how can they even advise you what they're doing? I mean, well, let's start from the beginning. California Association of Realtors took all forms related to buyer agent compensation away from the listing agent. So your listing agent's not even authorized to discuss or negotiate buyer agent compensation in writing. Now, when the clause comes in, the sort of what I've been seeing as a training on the net is that an agent is authorized to discuss your net. So you're like, well, what am I going to net if I sell the home at this price with these requests? And they can say, well, your price of your home's $1 million. Your real estate commissions will be 5.5%. So that's $55,000. There'll be another, let's say, percent for title and escrow. Maybe sometimes a 1.1. It depends on the area in California. So it'll be you'll be out approximately $60,000 to $65,000. So on $1 million offer, you'll get $935,000. Like, realtors are licensed to do that. They're licensed perhaps to talk to you about what they're seeing in terms of requests for buyer agent compensation. But I don't see how legally they can call up the buyer's agent and discuss buyer agent compensation. They're not authorized in writing to do it. And remember, in the past, it was their money. They were the listing agent. They pre-negotiated 5 or 6% with you. They were sharing half their money with the buyer's agent. The buyer's agent was really, in many ways, at least initially, they were sub-agents of the listing agent. They were working for the listing agent. The problem was when that broke apart, then these lawsuits were inevitable that caused these major shifts, these class action suits for $1.6 billion against agents. It was almost inevitable. They were doing everything they could. In my opinion, it looked like they were doing everything they could to have people properly advised and have attorneys. And because of that, when they broke it apart, and they're like, well, that's a buyer's agent, there's a listing agent, but the listing agent was still negotiating the buyer's agent money, and they didn't have the decency to protect their clients and make them have attorneys on their team. Those lawsuits and those losses were inevitable, because as a friend who had a lot of friends who were still judges when I first became a realtor, even judges despise real estate agents. So, it was inevitable, right? The system thinks realtors are overpaid and frequently undereducated. I know they're not all, but people who spend a lot of money on their education to deal with contracts and understand these things cannot believe that there's other people making more money and easier money. That's what they think than them. And they know nothing and they're not educated. And that's just the bias. So you got a legal system set up like that. And then you got the public that hates realtors because they make so much money and can't stand there. They're well-dressed and drive nice cars. And was it even, $1.6 billion was a lot of money, but was it a surprise? Will it happen over and over again? Is it going to happen again now? I don't think it's done. I think we're going to have local lawsuits and whenever what they agree to in the federal level, and when they figure out what the limits of what, who's bound by that, there'll be more lawsuits coming, because these forms, they're not really fair to the sellers. The realtors should have a form that says, before you sign my listing agreement, you should talk to an attorney about the risks of buyer agent compensation and how to sell a home properly. And really, I'm not against buyer agent compensation. I think you can leverage it properly. And if you're going to pay it, you should leverage it, but you want to mitigate the risks. We haven't even got in. There's so much more to this, but this is, I'm going to do a short version of this too, right after this, because I realize I'm going a long way, but I might as well finish this. So, setting compensation amount. This is what I was thinking for my own practice, even though I'm an attorney and advisor and I can do all the paperwork, I was thinking the most locked in way to do this would be to put $1,000 on the HUD for a buyer's attorney, and then have the buyer's attorney state that they counseled the seller on these risks I'm about to explain, and that the buyer on those risks, and the buyer agreed to them. But I personally wouldn't advise all but the most risk-averse sellers to follow that process, because that's really jumping the buyer's agent and the buyer through hoops. And I'm not even sure that an attorney would sign off on that document. The attorney might want to get paid $1,000, but he might say that, what I counsel my client is between the client and I. I'm not agreeing to do that for $1,000. I'm not going to sign off on that. So it might have to be more money. There's a better way. Put it that way. And I've since I wrote this form, there's a better way. But I'm putting it out there as an attorney. I hope there's a lot of attorneys still watching. That form, that clause would be optional for your sellers. Only, I think, truly the most risk averse. And even then, there's still going to be work, because we're going to still want them to mitigate the risks of the price fixing that's built into the forms, of the commission fixing or keeping prices high. The two ways fiduciary duty of the buyer's agents can be compromised, or more. There's two that I know of. The steering risk that's built in, and that where the source of the money's coming from. We'd like waivers, acknowledgments. There's multiple forms that I think if you're offering buyer agent compensation, then you decide how many hoops, what the market's like. It's my idea. Market temperature report from the listing agent. What do the people think of the price of the home and you're getting a lot of requests for showings? Are there offers or offers on the way? What is the competition doing? Is it going pending? Is it coming on the market? Is it selling? So you get the market temperature report. Then the seller's risk aversion, like how much do they want to sell the home? How much do they want to sell the home to this buyer for that price? And then you determine the risk mitigation strategy. A whole nother module on that. Right now, this is sort of what an attorney, we'll do the short version. I'll do it as if I'm counseling a seller and attorney in the next video, but I'm doing the comprehensive one right now. If the seller agrees that offering a specific buyer agent compensation, if the seller agrees to, I got a typo there, to offering a specific buyer agent compensation, the seller authorizes the listing agent to state that blank is being offered as buyer agent compensation, provided the buyer's entitled. So we can, that's this whole section. So I would take out this whole section for most sellers. But here's a disclosure of the risks again. We've got the seller acknowledges the following risks associated with offering buyer agent compensation: fiduciary conflicts, steering, reputation and pricing risks, legal challenges. I mean, one of the things are how likely is it for a buyer to sue the seller after the close? Well, that's one thing. But first of all, being that I've now put out videos, let me give you a little background. I recently put out a video where I said to buyers, don't press that button on Zillow. And I explained, I'm the listing agent right now on this property on Zillow. I've got multiple offers. Right now, where we are with our multiple offers is the buyers we've set it up. We had multiple offers. They're competing against each other. We've got people making full priced offers and requesting zero buyer agent compensation. And in fact, in the end, because someone who came up from 200,000 lower came up and said, I really want to get this deal. I'm like, well, you're going to have to pay a little more, at least, to be the strongest. Otherwise, why would we switch to you? And this was, when you get this many offers, your seller eventually says, yes, do your best. I'm happy enough with the numbers. Not thrilled, happy enough, but do your best. So I was like, well, this is where we have multiple ones. So you're going to have to come in higher. But if you also want buyer agent compensation, as you did earlier, because I looked at their contract, I said, you're going to have to build that into your price too. You're have to go over by that much. And so I might not explain that last part was a last minute development. But in my video, I said, so why would you pay this blue button at Zillow, be routed to a buyer's agent before you even see the property? The buyer's agent's going to make you agree to pay $25,000 or $30,000. I said, why would that be in your interest when I've already got multiple offers on this home right now? I said it the morning of an open house, I believe. And I said, so you press that blue button, you're now overpaying for that property, guaranteed. And they got sued, class action suits, just a few months later. So I'm not, had I also said that in the past? Yes. But when I said it again after the buyer agent compensation thing switched to, 3 or 4 months later, class action suits in Seattle against Zillow. I'm telling you, that was an easy one. Because it was, I couldn't believe it. I was like, think about this. They're making their buyers pay a buyer agent because of the way buyer agent compensation works in California. They're going to have to probably agree to 2.5 or 3%. And there's no way they're going to get the home for the value where other people are right now. They'd have to offer that much more to win this home. How is that in the buyer's interest? By the way, for attorneys, that's another thing. If we work together, I will discuss that module. For attorneys that want to develop business, that's another module. Helping buyers buy direct from the listing agent. That is where we need to be in the future in strong markets again. It might not be as important as in a down market. So anyway, so here we've got. So what I was saying is that buyers in slower markets and down markets are disgruntled. When I was at the top, because I lived in Solana Beach and I had an office in Del Mar, and I never should have moved. There used to be Del Mar real estate attorney was the #1 listing there. I used to get calls all the time, and some of those calls would come in from people who are either trying to get out of contracts, listing and otherwise, but a fair, I'd say 2 to 3 times a month from buyers that were unhappy with the home they purchased. They feel like something wasn't disclosed. They, in down markets, particularly back in the short sale markets, people would call all the time and try to get out of deals. And they'd want to go back and for any little thing and try to get some money, squeeze some money out of the seller or the realtors. I mean, people call agents and lawyers. And I can tell you most of the time, you're evaluating the claim. You're like, oh, you got something there, but I'm not going to do it for a contingency fee. And they're like, do you know any lawyers that will? And I'm like, no, I don't know any lawyers that would sue in those matters on a contingency fee. But there might be now. I mean, if you have a guaranteed breach of fiduciary duty because they paid a percentage to the agent and didn't mitigate the risks, you might be able to help sell any disgruntled buyer now. I mean, I think that could be a cottage industry for lawyers. So what are realtors doing not mitigating the risks? Steering, as I said, is built in. So far, people don't care, but Zillow didn't care for a bunch of years. And then one day, people did, and they got sued in a class action suit. So that's the long version of this form. I will do the short version as if I'm talking to a seller as an instruction for attorneys. Maybe today. I might have time. But if you go to listingattorney.com, if you're an attorney particularly, and you'd like to see the entire method where basically I think all attorneys are worth, because of all the things, like if you look at all the things an attorney can do, help with the disclosures, review the contract, properly leverage buyer agent compensation and set that whole up so a seller can sell for more, properly respond to requests for buyer agent compensation in the negotiations and mitigate these risks. When you put all that together, they're at least as valuable as the listing agent on these transactions. So I could show you over time how you can get 50 to 60% of the commissions without becoming a broker yourself. But I'm starting off with saying, if you're willing to do some of that work, I think you should be getting $6,000 to $10,000 on the HUD from the listing agent fees paid to you. And in case a lender balks, you should have a backup plan. That's all part of our system. And in our system, I mean, you might watch all my videos and say, I got it. And that's fine. That's great. In fact, I hope we can do business together. But you might say, John, I'd like help. And I've got two ways to do it. If you want to go through all the training ahead of time, I have a program for that. Or if you just want to refer a listing to me and I'll coach you, instead of coaching my seller, I coach you, then you coach the seller. I figure after we do a few of those files together, you wouldn't need me anymore. I'd like to still work with you, but I'd be transferring the core information you need on these transactions to run your own business yourself. So maybe it's 5. I mean, there's so many different things that happen in a real estate brokerage that I think you might need 5 to 7 transactions working with me. And then you'd be willing to do this on your own. But, love, depending on how much experience, maybe it's 1 or 2. So we have programs like that. So go to listingattorney.com, set up a free consult with me, and we'll see how we can work together. My name is John McConnon. I'm a broker and an attorney in California. Thank you.